going to tell us about?
Brain health, cognitive optimization through optimizing metabolic health, which is a cornerstone of brain health, actually. And I already feel like a cyborg. I've got this on my head, so off to a
We'll see
to a
how
good start.
cyborg you are by the end of the day.
Yes.
Right, so take it away, Max. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's incredible to be here. First of all, thank you to the organizers and the event. It's a real privilege to be here in Stockholm. This is my second time here, but the first time I was in and out to do a shoot at the Karolinska Institute, which is doing incredibly exciting research, but I actually got to explore this time, which is really exciting. So a little bit of background on me, if you've never heard of me. In the States, I do a lot of work in media, so I'm not a doctor, I'm not technically a scientist, but I have become sort of the go-to brain health expert on the Dr. Oz show, which is the largest sort of health show in the States, and it's streamed around the world. Here's me lecturing at the largest nutrition school in the world, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. In 2008, I hosted a huge event for the TED conference called Pangea Day, which streamed to 150 countries worldwide. I used to work for former US Vice President Al Gore to host his TV network, Current TV in the States. But I became, as of 5 years ago, obsessed with brain health, specifically cognitive longevity, cognitive optimization. And one of my latest projects is a documentary called Breadhead, which is the first ever film to cover the science, to document the science of dementia prevention. And that's the reason why I've been previously in Stockholm, because one of the landmark studies to validate my research and the research of many other clinicians around the world is a trial that was undertaken at the Institute called the Finger Trial, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So for me, again, it's a real privilege to be here at such an amazing event. I'm such a huge fan of technology, but my obsession with this work is not so much, or at least didn't begin, to explore the world of biohacking, which was a novel idea to me, but it was really to help my mom, who 5 years ago, or 6 years ago now, began showing strange symptoms of memory loss. So I had never had a family history of dementia or memory problems or anything like that. At the time, I was living in Los Angeles hosting a TV show, and my mom, when she began complaining offhandedly of symptoms of memory loss and mental fogginess, it was a very novel concept to me. I didn't know what that was. I kind of assumed that it was just part of the natural progression of aging. But it turned out that my mom had something seriously awry with her cognitive health, and I became obsessed with learning everything I could about dementia, specifically Alzheimer's disease, because it's the most common form of dementia, and what we can do to prevent that from happening to ourselves. Because I learned that the changes that begin in the brain that will ultimately lead a person to visit a neurologist's office for the first time begin decades before the first symptom. They have seen biomarkers associated with Alzheimer's disease in the brains of people that are in their 20s. So this is a lifelong cascade that we have the power to seize the reins of, and it begins here with us today. So one of the things that I want to talk about in my time on stage is brain metabolism. The brain is the most metabolically hungry organ in your body. It accounts for a huge percentage of your basal metabolic rate, which means that a large percentage of all the food that you eat and the oxygen that you breathe is going to create energy in your brain. And that energy supplies your brain for all of its many processes, from swiping through your favorite dating app to playing video games to studying for a test. So metabolism is really truly everything. And what's so cool about brain metabolism is that each and every one of us is really heir to the universe's most advanced hybrid. I don't know if you guys have a better hybrid here in Sweden, but in the States, this is sort of like you get the most bang for your buck in terms of mileage with a Toyota Prius. And I actually love the way it's designed. And what I think is so cool is that each and every one of us basically have something like that in our brains. Our brain is able to use two forms of fuel, much like a Prius, which can use gasoline and electricity. Are you guys with me so far? Yeah. Okay, great. So these two forms of fuel that I mentioned, one of them, they're called ketones, and the other is glucose, okay? Ketones are sort of like the brain's electricity. It's very clean burning. And glucose is what we burn when we eat a banana or a slice of bread. And for most people hooked onto the Western diet, the Western way of life, glucose is the primary fuel that the brain will burn throughout the day. But ketones are a very clean burning fuel source. In fact, ketones are our body's primordial fuel, if you will. So when a human baby is born, aside from being very cute, human babies are very fat. In terms of the fatness of a human baby, we are the fattest mammals at birth. If you've ever looked at a baby chimp, they're ripped. They're about 2 to 3% body fat. A human baby is about 15% body fat. We're fatter than seals at birth. Now, why is that? Is it to keep us warm? Well, the latest research suggests that that fat is actually a huge battery for our brain. Now, why is that? Because when babies are born, our brains are undeveloped. We undergo what's called the fourth trimester out in the world, socializing with people, our parents, and that's why we're so smart as organisms. That's why we're so social, because we develop around other people. And so this body fat is literally brain fuel for our growing brains, which continue to grow and develop outside of the womb. Chimps are not this fat. Chimps are very lean. Again, 3% body fat compared to us, 15% body fat. So again, seals, as adorable as they are, we're fatter. And this, again, is why we are so intelligent. And ultimately, what we owe, the way we live too, the fact that, we come packaged with fat. Fat is this amazing gift for our brains, which at birth account for 90% of our basal metabolic rate. And that is supplied by ketones. Actually, breast milk is about 20% of a 20% constituted by a kind of fat called a medium-chain triglyceride. Are you guys familiar with medium-chain triglycerides? If you're not, medium-chain triglycerides are a form of fat that become rapidly converted to ketones in the liver, whether or not you're in a ketotic state. So we're born packaged with fat. We drink breast milk, which is filled with ketones, with a kind of fat that convert to ketones. So literally, our brains are hooked onto this ketogenic drip, as we develop, and that's something that we've basically become coerced to forsake as we sort of enter adulthood and adopt a high-carb standard American diet. At this point in our lives, our brains use about 25% of our base metabolic rate. But as I mentioned, again, that's still a huge percentage. So, there's a lot of metabolism in the brain, and metabolism requires oxygen. And when our brains use oxygen, we generate oxygen radicals, which are oxidative. It's what happens when you slice an apple and you leave it out at room temperature and it turns brown. That's aging, that's decay, and that's something that we owe to an exposure to oxygen. So in people with Alzheimer's disease, there's an excess of something called oxidative stress in the brain, which is basically when the seesaw tips. Normally, free radicals are something that our bodies can overcome because we generate our own antioxidants. But aging is really what occurs when we age and we decline. It's when that scale is tipped and we are no longer able to outrun that process. And there are many disease processes associated with an excessive degree of oxidative stress in the brain. But what's so exciting about ketones is that, this keeps going ahead 2 slides for some reason. What's so exciting about ketones is that they generate more brain energy by using less oxygen. So in a sense, ketones are an anti-aging, a geroprotective source of brain fuel. You generate, again, and this is what's so exciting about ketones as a fuel, more energy by using less oxygen. So it's inherently anti-aging. And ketones can supply up to 60% of your brain's metabolic fuel. We have a sort of minimum requirement for glucose of about 40%. But again, 60% of the brain's fuel can come from ketones. But aside from supplying the brain's fuel, which is a very clean burning fuel source, ketones are also a signaling mechanism in the brain. And they have been shown to boost neurotropic growth factors in the brain, one of which is BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is decreased in patients with Alzheimer's disease, but also in people with depression. So this is a really powerful growth factor that promotes neuroplasticity. Are you guys familiar with the concept of neuroplasticity? So for many years, scientists believe that our brains peaked at around 25 and then begun a long gradual process that was accelerated with every beer that we'd have until we died. But now we know that our brains are highly plastic, which means that we can change, we can grow new brain cells, and BDNF is actually considered sort of like a miracle grow for the brain in that sense. The other thing that ketones have been shown to do is promote blood flow to the brain by up to 39%. Again, they decrease oxidative stress, and just to sort of underscore how important this is, fighting oxidative stress is a constant game of tug-of-war for all living things. And by using ketones as a brain fuel, we can sort of help stack the odds in our favor for once. And they also enhance mitochondrial efficiency by creating new mitochondria and again decreasing oxidative stress, which damage your mitochondria. So ketones are a little bit popular these days, or at least more so, but in reality, ketones have been used in clinical practice for about 80 to 100 years now at this point as a gold standard treatment for epilepsy. There are a lot of supplements on the market, and I think that some of them are valuable. But in essence, the best way to make ketones is that we can manufacture them in our own bodies, which is so exciting, and it's completely for free. So actually the quickest way, bar none, to create ketones in one's body is fasting. Basically everything else is slower. Starvation and fasting is the best way. As soon as glucose ceases to become available, your body will basically open up the ketone fire hose by tapping into your fat stores. And what this is essentially is a form of biochemical liposuction, which is so cool. And we can sort of tap into that by just allowing ourselves to go hungry. And that's not something that many of us like to experience today because we're hooked on glucose. We experience something called hanger, which is like hunger and anger, and I've been there. Trust me. I used to, before I began this journey, I was always a health nut, and I was, really interested in eating whole grains. I used to think that the more grains we ate, the better, honestly, because that's what we're told. But I would often experience bouts of hunger and hanger, and now that I have adopted a lower carbohydrate diet, I never experience that. I'm fasted right now. So, again, to really produce ketones at your maximal rate, you want to not eat. But, intermittently, you don't want to be malnourished. That's not the point of intermittent fasting. But to achieve ketones in another way, we can adopt what's called a ketone-producing diet or a ketogenic diet. And that involves eating a very low carbohydrate diet. And these are some of the foods that you can enjoy on a low carb diet. And basically what happens is you deprive your body of exogenous glucose, which is a fancy way of saying carbohydrates or concentrated sources of carbohydrates. And to make up the slack, because you still need to supply brain energy, your body will dip into its fat stores, turning on that biochemical liposuction fire hose. Unfortunately, again, we've been told that to attain health, we need to eat unlimited fruits and vegetables as if they are the same thing, which they are not. 7 to 11 servings of whole grains per day is the mandate, or was the mandate for a long time in the United States. I was actually recently in Finland to shoot the intervention trials for the finger study, which I mentioned earlier, which was done out of the Karolinska Institute. And I noticed something really interesting about their food. They have a food pyramid, much like we have in the States, and grains used to be at the bottom, but they were sort of demoted to one step higher, and I think that that's kind of telling. Even though there's huge industry associated with grains and grain production, I think it's starting to dawn on our scientific, bodies that eating diets that are based on rapidly absorbing forms of carbohydrates is not only non-essential, but deleterious perhaps to our health. Also, our food supply has changed a lot. So I think about, when I think about the term biohacking, which we're all huge fans of here, I think a large portion of the effort is made for people like us that really want optimal health, not so much in hacking our own biology, but in hacking the environment, because we live in such a different environment today than that in which our brains evolved. And there's a lot of sort of disharmony and asynchrony involved in, not only the food supply, but in terms of our lifestyles as well. So if you look at this, we have a wild banana on the top. That's what bananas used to look like. And these fruits were literally, we co-evolved with them, as we have with all of our food, to really, store those carbohydrates in our fat, in our adipose tissue, to get us through the winter. Today, not only are they bred for a sweeter taste, but more starch than ever before. And what that's doing to our waistlines is pretty apparent as you travel. So, you might be inclined to think at this point that I am, super low carb, and I believe that chronic ketogenic diets are the way to go. But actually, that's not true. So I think that the optimal brain diet to, again, minimize oxidative stress, to stack the odds in our favor, to supply our brains with a really clean burning fuel source, is to eat no carbs. That's actually not true. So I think that insulin signaling, and this is something that I mentioned at a talk that I did at the Paleo Institute a couple of nights ago. I think insulin signaling is very important. The problem is that signal is lost on our bodies and brains because of the diets that we have all adopted, where many of us, especially in the United States, are insulin resistant. We have metabolic syndrome, we have prediabetes, and we're diabetic, which basically means we're resistant to insulin. We've become tolerant to insulin. But once we've regained metabolic health, which is to say insulin sensitivity, insulin signaling is actually quite important. It's responsible for promoting a healthy mood with its friend leptin. Have you guys heard of leptin? It's a sort of satiety hormone along with insulin. It signals to our bodies that we are in a state of food abundance. The problem is, today we're in a state of food abundance 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So that message is lost. But by attaining insulin sensitivity, we not only send the signal to our brains that food is around, but that actually makes us more social. It makes us more prone to expending energy to socialize and to network and to procreate. So by eating a chronically low carbohydrate diet, that might fight one of our goals of procreating. So people that are looking to have children might benefit from eating the occasional carb refeed. Insulin signaling is also really important for muscle growth. So insulin is the body's chief anabolic hormone, which means to grow, to build. And growing muscle, I think, should be a goal for all of us as we age. It becomes increasingly difficult to put on muscle and maintain muscle. And the way that I think about muscle, having muscle in our bodies, is that they're basically big glucose banks. They store muscle and provide us additional leeway for carbohydrate intake. Insulin is really important also for LDL recycling, which is has been long thought of as the bad cholesterol in the body. It's not bad cholesterol. It's, first of all, not cholesterol at all. It's a lipoprotein that carries cholesterol around your body. But there's a recycling process that needs to occur for that LDL to be healthy and to promote a healthy vascular system. And insulin is actually quite important to get the liver to recycle your LDL particles efficiently. And insulin is also really important for thyroid hormone production. Again, exercise is really important. It's also one of the top ways to boost BDNF, which is a brain growth factor that I've mentioned previously. And there is a correlation between muscle size and brain health. It's quite important for maintaining insulin sensitivity, mobility, and things like that. Are you guys keeping up? Are you understanding everything so far? Okay, great. This is awesome. So aside from diet and eating a diet that promotes ketone availability to the brain, there are many other things that we can do to promote, optimal cognitive function. And honestly, although I'm a huge nutrition nerd, my goal has really become to really embody a walking meta-analysis for all of this research, because it all is additive, and there's this biological concept of synergy where 1 + 1 = 3. So I'm really interested in everything that we can do. One of the best ways that we can sort of hack our biology, this was a funny thing that I created on Instagram Because, oftentimes we look for the low-hanging fruit, no pun intended. And one of the best things that we can do every day to promote brain health is to eat a large salad. It's not technological. It's right there. The huge bowl of dark leafy greens provides nutrients to our brains that we are direly in need of. Everything from magnesium to potassium to prebiotic fiber for the microbes that live in our large intestine, as Timu alluded to. So, vegetable consumption is quite important. And, again, these are the kinds of nutrients that we have co-evolved with and have ultimately become lost to the modern diet. Just as an example, potassium is something that's found in many vegetables and fruits. And actually salmon, wild salmon, is a great source of potassium, which is sort of unusual. But researchers speculate that our hunter-gatherer ancestors consumed 4 times the amount of potassium as we do today. And potassium works diligently with sodium to help regulate healthy blood pressure. These are our dark leafy greens. Look at how beautiful they are. That looks to me like maybe kale, romaine. So healthy. I try to eat a large salad every single day. Sauna use. I can't be in Scandinavia and not mention sauna use. I know that saunas have been talked about at previous Biohacker summits, but recent research is really compelling in the area that I'm obsessed with, and that is dementia prevention. And work, I believe that was published this year out of Finland, has shown that regular sauna use up to 7 days a week was associated with a 65% reduced risk over 20 years for developing Alzheimer's disease and dementia. That's really exciting. And that's an associative study, but there are some really interesting mechanisms that have come out in the literature that would suggest why this may occur. Everything from, heat stress to promoting, again, the expression of BDNF and insulin sensitivity and the like. So, aside from eating a healthy diet, stress, hormetic stressors, which is basically like mild stress that sends a signal to our genes to adapt and to grow stronger, really is one of these things that we should really embody in our lives. And this is the study, very exciting stuff, published in the journal Antiaging. There was a dose effect, which was very compelling.
Did you have to do it every day?
No, so there was a dose effect. Which means that the more people did it, the lower their risk seemed to be. So anywhere from once to twice a week to 7 days a week was associated with reduced risk. So Finland is actually the sauna capital of the world. As I'm sure you guys know, there's about 1 sauna per household in Finland, which is crazy. And there's actually a wonderful documentary that I highly recommend you check out called Steam of Life, where it's a weird documentary, but it shows us sort of the sauna culture and it provides a window into the really sort of intimate conversations that happen in those venues, if you want to call them that. No, they have Alzheimer's. And again, these are correlational studies. The thing about this research is that you can do everything right and still develop Alzheimer's disease. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of knowns, but I would say there are more unknowns than knowns. And this is a field that's rapidly accelerating, thanks in part to research like what's being done at the Karolinska Institute and elsewhere around the world. 90% of what we know about Alzheimer's disease has been discovered in the past 15 years. So this is a very exciting and rapidly growing field. And I don't pretend to have all the answers. In fact, the more I learn about this field, the less I feel like I know. And I think that any true expert should feel the same way. In fact, I've been called on national TV in the States many times at this point, a brain health expert. And it's a topic that becomes increasingly intimidating to me because the more I learn, the more I want to know, the less I feel like I know. And I think that really is a sign of, that's ultimately how we should live at the end of the day, I believe. There's a lot of people that pretend to have all the answers or think that they have all the answers, but there's a lot of unknowns. That being said, we have sort of at this point in our understanding of the disease process, a roadmap so that we can put safe interventions like the ones that I've discussed into practice. And it seems, at least in terms of observation and association that we really can go a long way in terms of protecting our brains and optimizing their function. So this is a little graph that I created about my sort of goals with my work. You know, I began focused on you know, what might be done to somebody who is already experiencing cognitive problems, and the research seems to be really compelling to suggest that with a sort of full lifestyle battery approach, like I'm sure many of us take here, there is hope that we might be able to improve our focus and our concentration and our ability to remember things if we're at this end of the bell curve and move them closer to center. But what if we're already at the center? What if we're already at X like we are today? We're cognitively healthy, right? We don't have dementia. We have decades before, you know, on average, the emergence of these symptoms would appear. If we take these same steps, might we end up over there? And the research really seems to suggest that it's possible that if we take these steps to optimize our cognitive function and protect our long-term brain health, not only are we going to you know, help minimize our risk for terrible diseases for which there is no meaningful treatment, we might actually make ourselves happier and perform better in the process, which is what we all want, having gathered here today at the Biohacker Summit. So that's my presentation, and I'd love to take some questions if you guys have any. Thank you so much for listening. One question.
Yeah.
Yes.
So shoot.
Yes.
Gentleman right there. Yeah, 2 microphones for the gentleman.
I don't know. Okay, now it works. Does measuring your blood serum BDNF level have any value? There is a, for example, laboratory in Berlin which offers that. IMD Berlin offers BDNF in serum. Does it have is it relevant to the brain, BDNF?
Is it? No. They don't routinely test BDNF in the clinical setting because it's a short-lived protein. It fluctuates quite rapidly. So no, it's not really something that at this point they measure.
I mean, the laboratory measures it. It offers. You can pay and get it measured in the serum. And
right.
The question is it useful for anything to have it measured in serum?
The clinical utility to measure a sort of cross-section of your BDNF, I think, is limited. If we are able to get to the place where we can have continuous BDNF measuring, that I think would, like the way that some people are using continuous glucose monitoring, I think that might be optimistic. But for the time being, I think that there are some much better biomarkers to look at. So one of them, for example, if you guys are taking notes, would be your homocysteine. Generally, lower levels of homocysteine are better. Another sort of biomarker that I think is worth knowing is your HOMA-IR, which is basically a measure of your level of insulin sensitivity, lower being better. I mean, a lower number is better, and that shows higher levels of insulin sensitivity. A higher number would be higher levels of insulin resistance. Hope that answers your question.
Max Lugavere, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.